Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom is back and welcome back to another episode of What Can You Get From That Pack? Yes, we have 2 of these episodes in this series within the same week. Now this pack means a lot to me, not because I like the pack, but it's because I love the prize card that's being given out. Now, usually there should be a jailbreak event going on. I don't know if it came back already. It may not have because there was that overflowing, glitch or problem or whatever it is with people overflowing into the bracket. But whenever that comes back, the prize card is going to be the Dodge Charger Jailbreak, which is the first prize card that I genuinely wanted in about 2 months. The last one being the Hennessy F5 Venom, and everything else, just stuff that, not F5 Venom, but just the Hennessy F5, and every other prize card that has come in between the Hennessy and the Jailbreak, I've never really cared about. So yeah, this is the pack that you need to open, or I need to open, to compete for this very amazing, epic prize card that means a lot to me. Now, one thing I have to say is that this series of What Can You Get From That Pack is getting tougher and tougher to upload, because it's getting tougher and tougher to judge all these cars. Look, I'm saying it's tougher and tougher because people are starting to critique me on saying that I'm being too harsh on cars and this and that and the third and everything. The problem is this, right? The game gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Like in 2018, there were like 1,000 cars, and now we're sitting at, 4,000 plus. The problem is, no matter how big that pool of cars get, the elite level will always stay the same. There's always going to be maybe 100 to 200 or maybe even 300 elite level cars. We're talking cars like the Peugeot 308 Maxi. We're talking about cars like the BMW M5, for example, or maybe cars like the Aston Martin DB3S for Super Air, etc., etc., etc. No matter what happens, we could get more and more cars in top drives, but the elite level will never change. There will always be like 200 to 300 cars. So I think, usually in this series, I like to judge everything in a general sense, but we're going to take a little twist today, okay? But obviously we have to stick to our roots. So I made a second tier list. In this tier list, this is my super honest tier list. This is how I would have done it originally. This is like how I think of the pack in a general sense. If we compared the cars in this pack to almost 5,000 cars in the game, right? Basically, all of these cars will make somewhat of an impact, and everything else you see over here, this heaping pile of shit, is all mostly hot garbage or pernicious ulcer or one of the two. Like, these are cars that you're probably never ever going to use, especially if you're an intermediate going to an advanced player. But obviously if you're a beginner player, these cars will make an impact in your garage. But you need to remember that I am an advanced player, and a lot of these cars don't bring any value to me. And even if I had to use them, there are better options for me to use, right? So in a general sense, this is how I see the pack. But we're going to take a different approach today. I'm going to be comparing every single car from the 1990s to 1994 carbon fiber to only cars that are from 1999 and below and before, okay? So we're going like from year 0 all the way to 1999. So when I compare things like the Lancia Delta Integrale, for example, I'm not going to compare it to its 2000 and 2010s and 2020 counterparts. I'm only going to compare it to the 90s all the way down to year 0, basically, okay? So let's see if this tier list, using a different benchmark to judge the cars, will differ from this tier list when I judge all these cars in a general sense. Further ado, let's just get straight into it. We're gonna start with all the 4-wheel drive medium ground clearance cars, and I'm gonna show you a photo right here. So again, no 2000s, no 2010s, no 2020s, none of that. The best car still goes to the Ford RS200. Lo and behold, it's not even in this pack. We have the Audi S2 Coupe though, which shines a little bit more within this requirement, being the best car for a hairpin, Monaco hairpin, Canyon Tour, and of course hairpin dries. So it is just a hairpin kind of car, but it is able to beat the likes of the Ford RS200 and the Lancia Delta Integrale 16V, which is its main competition. So I would put the Audi S2 Coupe in frequent provider. It's kind of your hairpin specialist for the 90s 4-wheel drive performance medium and below. And yeah, that's like the first difference, because if I was judging this pack by a general sense, the Audi would probably go down to hot garbage or pernicious ulcer already. Now I want to show you another benchmark for the lower RQ stuff, mainly the Audi S2 Avant B4, the Holden Calibra, the Subaru Legacy, etc., etc., etc. And as you can see, all of these cars fail to perform. In terms of a low RQ 90s four-wheel drive performance tire car, or 80s as well, 90s and below, you would want to go for the red Lancia Delta Integrale, and obviously for any mid-range, you would go for the black 80s Lancia Delta Integrale 16V as well. So what I would say is this: in terms of frequent provider, I'll put the Ford Sierra just slightly below that and Pernicious Hauser because it's slightly worse than the Delta, which is, you know, the better car, the better option. Obviously, it's cheaper to use as well, but it isn't that good. But for all the other cars, as you can see, even within their own restricted niche, I'm putting it up against 90s cars and below. No 2000s, no 2010s, none of that. They still fail to make a difference. So Subaru Legacy, Holden Calibra, the Vauxhall, I'll put up in pernicious also, the Audi S2, they're all going to be terrible. They don't make any impact. So yeah, they're all going to end up in hot garbage. Now we're going to move on to the high-end scale of the 90s four-wheel drive medium ground clearance performance tire cars. And as you can see, the true standouts is the Peugeot 205 T16. Now when I say 90s, I basically mean 90s and before, so you know, pre-2000s. The Peugeot 205 T16 takes the cake for the super twisty stuff, and everything else is taken by the Mitsubishi Lancer GSR. The Ford Escort RS Cosworth is still showing, you know, pretty decently. It is second place in most track sets in the wet and the dry. So because of that, I'm going to put the Escort in daily driver, and I'm going to put the GSR in Der Kaiser. Now, again, if I was judging this in a general sense, not just pre-2000s, I'll probably move the Lancer down to daily driver and the Escort down to frequent provider, but I digress. We are putting this niche in where we're going to be judging these cars from pre-2000s only. Other cars to think about is the Lancia Delta Integrale and the Nissan Pulsar, which are also in this comparison. The Pulsar with a ridiculously weak showing, only getting second place in fast circuit rolling and third place in fast circuit wet, and that's all it has to its name. Considering that it isn't even the cheapest car to use in this comparison, I'm going to put it in hot garbage. The Lancia Delta Integrale also falling behind the Peugeot and the Mitsubishi. I'm going to put it down in pernicious ulcer, but then you need to remember that it's the best four-wheel drive performance tire medium ground clearance car for the entire country of Italy, and because of that, I'll bump it up ever so little to frequent provider. There's so many factors to think about when you want to judge cars nowadays. It's absolutely crazy. The Lancia Delta Integrale Evolution, which is 1 RQ cheaper than the Lancia Delta, is absolutely terrible, abysmal. It's going to be hot garbage, unfortunately. Now, moving on to our next comparison, I want to talk about the TVRs and the Dragsters, right? So, one thing that really surprised me, as you can see here, is that the TVR 500 is ridiculously strong, beating things like the Porsche 911 Turbo M42, also known as the Martini, 911 RS, and the TVR Chimera. Now, obviously, towards the far right sits the Porsche 968 Turbo S, which is still the best car to use. The reason why I'm not showing the times is because once I show you the 332 times, it's going to be gold everywhere, and people will tend to forget how good the TVR Griffin 500 actually is in that pre-2000s drag niche. So because of that, I'm going to put it in Der Kaiser. Just feels like a wrong place for me to put the TVR Griffith. I'll put it in daily driver. At the end of the day, it's not the best option that you can use, but it's a great bargain. It is a fantastic bargain. But then again, if we're even judging by pre-2000s for the drag, then you might as well put in, you know, the Charger 3, which is the better car. But within that 90s niche, I can say the TVR Griffith. That 80s and 90s niche, the TVR Griffith 500 is going to be a pretty great banger for you. Now, moving on to the rest of the dragsters that we saw, nothing too special from the rest of the TVRs, honestly. I'm going to put them all in pernicious ulcer. The TVR Chimera, not too bad. I'll put that in frequent provider, mainly because it has a ridiculously low 0 to 60. But the Chimera 4.3, however, that's going to be pernicious also. But the 5.0, I'll put it in frequent provider just because it's a slightly better car. But rightly so, because it is higher RQ compared to its 4.5 counterpart as well. So for once, it's pretty well balanced, I would say. Now, moving on are the Porsches. Porsche is a bit tough because they have great MRA. But, you know, they are losing to the drag specialist in the TVR as well. Now, the 968 Turbo S, we'll put that in Der Kaiser for basically like 90s and pre-2000s cars, it's still a really strong car. I mean, shout out, if you remember back in the day, that 968 Turbo S used to be an epic. Now, moving on is going to be the other Porsche. Where is it? The 911 RS. This one, I'm going to put, it's really, really expensive to use, and it's not even the best car for the 1 mile. I'm going to have to put it in pernicious ulcer, looking at the times over here. Now, moving on to our low ground clearance rear drive performance tire cars, I'm going to show you a different photo. This is going to include low range RQ cars, so 53 and below. As you can see, Acura NSX, the American one being the best option to use. I'll put that in daily driver. The Japanese one just being slightly worse, I will put that in frequent provider. Then you have your other cars like the Nismo and the 911 and the Di Tommaso. All these kind of cars, they kind of just fall really short and behind, so I'm going to put them all in hot garbage as well. So 1, 2, well, maybe not hot garbage, because again, Italian cars that handles pretty well. Other things you need to think about: Pantera, put in pernicious ulcer. 911 Carrera 2 Targa, I'm going to put that in hot garbage. Again, another car where it's RQ50, but it's borderline super rare at this point. The Nissan Silvia, not too bad. This one's still one of your specialists, kind of cheap Honda NSX in the Japanese division. Like in Japan, there are not a lot of these. I mean, I guess it competes. I mean, when I mean these, I mean cars that compete within its niche. I think the main things I can think of against the Nissan Silvia Nismo is going to be the Mazda RX-7, but that's about it. It's pretty decent. The fact that it's able to be second place on slalom test and fast circuit when I put it up against 53 RQ cars, it's still pretty respectable. Now, moving on to the rest of the times, low ground clearance, performance tire, higher epic ultra rares. I mean, higher ranked ultra rares. So things like the Donk, the Porsche 911, the Corvette, the Di Tommaso Guara, and the Lotus Esprit. Now, one thing to take into account is that the Esprit is falling behind. I'll put that in pernicious ulcer. Things like the Donkavort D8 and the Di Tommaso Guara are kind of like the shining lights. I'll put the Donkavort D8 here, as well as I'll put the Chevrolet ZR1 in frequent provider, because it's a pretty decent showing for the car park, indoor karting, karting circuit, twisty road, fast circuit rolling as well. So yeah, it doesn't win much. It only wins on twisty circuit, but it is second place in a lot of track sets. And then last but not least, the best one would be the Di Tommaso Guara, which I will put in Der Kaiser. And then we also have the Porsche 911 Turbo, which is going to be the dragster of choice for these hybrid pre-2000s low ground clearance performance high road drive cars. You see how in depth I have to go to make these cars shine? That's why in a general sense, most of these cars aren't actually that good. If you need to make so many requirements and restrict a car to so many requirements to make it, just perform respectably well, it's not actually that good of a car, is it? But that being said, I'm sticking to my criteria pre-2000s for this video. I'm going to put that in daily driver as well. Now, moving on to the standard tire representation of things. The best car is the Mazda 323 GT within that pre-2000 niche. It isn't listed in this pack, though, but I'm just showing you kind of how it beats all the other cars. So, like, for example, the Audi V8 Quattro, it's hot garbage in a general sense, and I'm also going to put it in hot garbage when I restrict it to pre-2000s, because it can't beat the Mazda 323 GT. It can't beat the Audi A4, which is 5 RQ cheaper than it to use, which is ridiculously sad. Now, one other car that barely wins anything is the Maserati Quattroporte, but this one I can't put in hot garbage because we need to remember it's like the only Italian ultra rare that has standard tires. So because of that, it becomes daily driver, because if there ever is an Italian rain event, the Maserati Quattroporte is going to be really useful for you. But things like the Audi V8 Quattro, even if there is a German 90s wet event, there's going to be better options than that car anyway. There are a lot of factors to think about making a video like this, man. It's absolutely crazy, and we're not even like halfway done with the pack yet. So let's move on to low ground clearance performance tire cars, shall we? We're going to begin with the Lancia Hyena and the Dodge Stealth. Now, these two cars are definitely daily drivers. They're both, they both handle really well. Where did the Hyena go? The Hyena just disappeared. Where did my Hyena go, bro? It went to pernicious ulcer. No, it's daily driver. So both of these cars are low ground clearance, a four-wheel drive. They handle well. They have low 0 to 60s, and basically they're the top of their niche in their respectable countries. The Hyena for Italy, and of course the Stealth for the USA. Now, moving on to the Mitsubishi GTOs. These two honestly are pernicious ulcer, just because there is a better GTO out there. So these two, I'm just going to put them here. Then the Alpha 155 GTA Stradale handles really well, like surprisingly well. On top of that, it also has that saloon niche. It has its performance tires, so it's not hindered by slick tires. Even though when I look at it, I think of slick tires. But the thing is pretty damn good. I'll put it in freaking provider. Moving on to the Aston Martin Vantage, it's a weaker version compared to the TVR Griffith. It has a very low 0 to 60 as well, but it doesn't have as good of an MRA, so because of that, I'm going to peg it down all the way to frequent provider. Then we have the BMW 540i, and again, we saw in that center tire comparison before, it doesn't make much of a dent. It's hot garbage. The BMW M3 being a 90s German car with medium ground clearance and handles okay. I'm going to put that in pernicious ulcer. The Dodge Viper RT10 is a fantastic car to have. Daily driver for sure. It has a ridiculous low 0 to 60, and it just brings really good hybrid performance for any American car pre-2000s. If not, it's one of the best. It's kind of like the American D. Tomaso Guara, if you will. The Donkavor D8 Z-Tech, again, just behind in the shadow of the Donkavor D8 Cosworth, so because of that, I'm going to put it down in pernicious ulcer as well. Then with the Lotus Carlton. Now, the Lotus Carlton was a jack-of-all-trades kind of car back in the day, not only because it had like hybrid stats, like it had a high top speed and good MRA, but also because it was a saloon, also because it was medium ground clearance, and honestly there are not a lot of British medium ground clearance performance tire rear-wheel drive cars out there. Most of them are either front-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. On top of that, this is the only Lotus that comes with medium ground clearance, so that is a niche in itself. Again, I'll put it in daily driver. You'll get a lot of use out of it in very certain requirements, but it could be a lifesaver. Now, moving on to the Mazda Cosmo. The Mazda Cosmo used to be an immaculate car back when it had 89 handling, but obviously got a handling cut. It still remains the best car within the pre-2000 standard tire category for hairpin road, fast circuit, Monaco hairpin, and Canyon Tour, but it isn't as good as it used to be. I'm going to put it down in frequent provider. The Subaru Impreza WRX goes in hot garbage as well. Whew, that was a lot. That was a lot. Now, let's move on to the Epics. Okay, we're not done yet. Now, the Epics, I did not check on the times too much. I'm using mainly my own intuition for this because there is still a lot of garbage to go around. The RS2 is terrible. The Nazca is terrible. And I'm not going to spend too much time on those cars because a lot of us playing won't even ever upgrade them anyway. We have the Caterham JPE, which still remains a really strong, lightweight, twisty car. The GMC Cyclone is 100% or Kaiser the Typhoon, just a slightly worse version of the GMC Cyclone, so I'm going to put that in daily driver. The Lamborghini Diablo is absolutely terrible, and the Lamborghini Diablo SE30, I'm actually going to put it in daily driver. See, if I was judging this in a general sense, I would have nothing good to say about the Diablo SE30, but looking at the times pre-2000s, as you can see in this comparison, it is the best car for the drags, beating things like the Dodge Viper ACR, the BMW Nazca, the Ultima Sports JPE, and even, here's a surprising one, the Pagani Zonda C12. So that is very, very impressive. Now, in the far right corner of the comparison, once again, hides the Lamborghini Diablo VT. The moment I put the times in for that car, it will be the best one. So because of that, I'm not going to show the times. But once again, if I put in the 332 times, it will be gold across the board for the drags. Not the twisties, but for the drags. The twisties still remains. The best goes to the Caterham JPE. I'm actually going to bump it up to Der Kaiser as well. It is a very, very strong contender. The Diablo, though, I'm not going to bump it up, mainly because the Diablo VT exists. So that's going to be Der Kaiser. Once again, that's only pre-2000s. If this was a general critique, then you would have seen what I thought about the VT. I don't think it's terrible, but definitely not Der Kaiser. Now, moving on to the slick tire cars, I do believe I have another. Yes, I do. Here's a screenshot. Again, the best one belongs to the Volvo 850 touring car, a car that you cannot use in the jailbreak event, but it is a 1994 car nonetheless, and it does beat cars like the Mazda Zetus and the Lanza Supra. Again, these two cars are considered as Jerry's. I don't know why anybody would ever want to, put any upgrades into them, but I would put the Zenus, not Zenus, but the Zedos at frequent provider and the Lantis at pernicious ulcer. And if you can look at the times, the Zetus 6 touring car just slightly better. Mercedes C112, I think this is not a Jerry. I think this is a purebred 65, as in like if a bunch of 65s went to ultra tomorrow because they didn't deserve to be in 65, the Mercedes-Benz wouldn't be one of them. It's pretty pretty good. Handles well, MRA is decent, and the top speed is high. So I would say that it is a true 65. The Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 1, aside from MRA, it doesn't bring anything else to the table. Handling isn't as good as it used to be. Four-wheel drive performance tires is light, but you know, as an ultra rare, it was fantastic. But as an epic, it's a little bit overrated in my opinion. The Porsche 911 RSR is a fantastic twisty car pre-2000s. It's able to beat things like the Mazda 254, the Porsche 924, Ford GT40, and the works. Okay, as you can see, once again, the pictures are on, and the times, pictures of the times are on the screen. Moving on to the lower range epics over here with the 911 Turbo S 3.6 Flambao. That's going to be hot garbage in my opinion. The 968 Turbo RS, slightly better, but not so much. I'm going to put that in pernicious also with the Roof BTR2, which is garbage, the RCT, which is garbage. I mean, honestly, the RCT has MRA, but again, it was a great 65 before. Now I think it'll be better off as a 64. Moving on is the Ultima Sports. Again, a car that I want to like, but we've seen the times on it already, and again, you know, it falls behind the Caterham JPE. The best I can give it is frequent provider. The Ultima Spider, also just in pernicious ulcer as well. Now we end off with the legendaries, and we're going to start off with the Alpha 155 GTA Super Turismo. MRA is great, handling is great, it's also a saloon. In a general sense, I would say it will be better as an epic, and it should go to an epic, but if we're judging it pre-2000s only, you could get a little bit more value out of it, so I'll put it in frequent provider. It's still not necessarily good. There are better saloons out there. Case in point, Audi V8 Quattro DTM, which I will put in daily driver. Then you have things like the Bugattis. Oh god, you know I hate this car, everybody. Like, I really hate this car. And you know, in a general sense, it's really easy to say that the thing is hot garbage, but in a pre-2000 sense, is the EB110 still hot garbage? Yes, it is. I'll put the times right here, as you can see, against French cars as well, from the pre-2000s, the Peugeot Oxia and the Peugeot Quasar. Clean it out the water. And I know what people are going to say, Blossom, how's this a fair comparison? You're comparing an 84 and an 88 to a 91 and a 92. Look. I could compare it to other 88s. I can compare it to other 84s, but they're not going to be pre-2000s. Okay, so, you know, no matter how you critique these cars, no matter how I critique these cars, there's always going to be some sort of anomaly. But one thing will always remain the same. The Bugatti EB110s are fucking shit. So I'm going to put them in pernicious ulcer for the silver and hot garbage for the blue. Last but not least is the Jaguar XJR 15. Brings a little bit more MRA to the table. Literally just a better option than the Bugattis. I'll put them in frequent provider. The Lancia Delta HF I will also put in frequent provider because most four-wheel drive off-road tire cars are pre-2000s. But then again, most of them are prize cars as well. It took me, my brain is hanging. Like, there's so much information that I need to remember for this pack review that, oh god, it's being overwhelmed. But last but not least is the McLaren F1. McLaren F1's a solid car. It's got ridiculously good top speed, 240 miles per hour, 100 MRA. It is a dragster, and it knows it wants to be a dragster. So overall, this is my review of the pack. Once again, this is what I think of the cars if we're only judging them from pre-2000s, and this is what I think of the cars when we're judging them in a general sense. Seriously, y'all, I mean, there isn't much of a difference. But anyway, guys, that's going to be... Actually, I'm going to move this Lancia Delta down since we've seen the top. But then again, it's Italian. It's the best Italian one. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys have a great day. I'm going to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night,